I still remember the exact sound my suitcase wheels made against that cold airport floor. Click, 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 like a countdown to the moment my heart would break completely. I had just gotten off a red-eye flight from visiting my sister across the country, and honestly, all I wanted was to see my son's familiar face waiting for me at arrivals. We'd planned this weeks ago. "Don't worry, Mom," he'd said over the phone, that confident voice I'd heard since he was little. "I'll be there at 8:30 sharp, Terminal B, right by the coffee shop." But as I walked through those sliding doors, scanning the crowd of people holding signs and flowers, he wasn't there. My first thought wasn't anger, it was worry. You know how it is when you love someone. Your mind immediately goes to the worst case scenario. Maybe there was traffic. Maybe his car broke down. Maybe something happened to him. So I pulled out my phone with shaking fingers and called, straight to voicemail. "Hi, sweetheart. It's Mom. I'm here at the airport. Just wondering where you are. Call me back." I stood there for maybe 20 minutes, watching other families embrace, listening to the constant airport announcements echoing overhead. Then I called again. Voicemail. And that's when something cold started settling in my chest. This wasn't like him to just disappear. Or maybe, if I'm being honest with myself now, maybe it was becoming exactly like him, and I'd just been too afraid to see it. I found a seat near that coffee shop he'd mentioned, my suitcase parked beside me like a faithful dog. Other travelers came and went, but I stayed put, staring at my phone, willing it to ring. It never did. What I didn't know then, sitting in that uncomfortable plastic chair, was that this moment, this seemingly simple missed pickup, was about to unravel everything I thought I knew about the son I'd raised, the relationship I'd cherished, and just how far I was willing to go to demand the respect I deserved. By hour 2, I'd called him 6 more times. I watched a young mother scoop up her toddler, spinning him around while he giggled. An elderly couple shuffled past, the husband gently guiding his wife by the elbow. A teenage girl ran into what must have been her father's arms, both of them laughing about something I couldn't hear. And there I sat, like some forgotten piece of luggage. I kept thinking about all those years when he was small. How I'd wake up at 5 a.m. to drive him to soccer practice, even though I was working 2 jobs and barely keeping my eyes open. How I'd sit in those freezing bleachers every Saturday, cheering louder than any other parent there. "That's my boy," I'd shout when he scored, my voice hoarse by the end of every game. When he got his first car at 16, a beat-up Honda that I'd saved for months to buy, I taught him how to change a tire in our driveway. "Always be reliable," I told him, my hands covered in grease. "When someone's counting on you, you show up." The irony of that memory wasn't lost on me now. I tried calling his apartment. No answer. I tried his work. They said he'd called in sick. Sick. While I'm stranded at an airport, he's apparently too sick to even send a text message. A janitor pushing a cart full of cleaning supplies stopped near my chair. "You been here a while," he said kindly. "Everything okay?" "My son was supposed to pick me up," I heard myself say. "He's just running late." The man nodded, but I saw something in his eyes that made my stomach drop. It was pity. Pure, gentle pity. Because he could see what I was still trying not to believe. My son wasn't running late. My son wasn't coming at all. That's when the panic really started to kick in. I called my sister, the one I'd just visited, but she was 3 states away and couldn't do anything except listen to me fall apart over the phone. "Honey," she said gently, "when's the last time you two actually talked? I mean, really talked?" I couldn't answer that question. Not honestly. I tried his best friend Marcus, the kid who used to eat dinner at our table 3 nights a week when they were teenagers. Marcus sounded uncomfortable, like he was choosing his words carefully. Mrs. Johnson. I haven't really talked to him much lately." Maybe try his girlfriend? Girlfriend? What girlfriend? My son hadn't mentioned anyone serious in months. I scrolled through my contacts, realizing how small my world had become. Most of my friends were busy with their own families, their own problems. My ex-husband, well, we'd barely spoken since the divorce 5 years ago, and he lived halfway across the country anyway. 3 hours in, I finally swallowed my pride and called my neighbor, Mrs. Chen. She'd always been kind to me, and she knew my son from when he'd lived at home. "Oh, honey," she said when I explained the situation. "I hate to tell you this, but I saw him leave this morning. He had a duffel bag and everything, looked like he was going somewhere for the weekend." The words hit me like a physical blow. He'd planned this. He'd packed a bag and left town while knowing I'd be sitting here, waiting for him. I hung up and stared at my phone screen, my hands trembling slightly. Airport coffee shops and gift stores blurred together as tears I'd been holding back for hours finally started to fall. A weekend trip, while his mother sat abandoned at the airport like some stranger he'd never met. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I wasn't worried anymore. I wasn't making excuses. I was getting angry. Really, really angry. By hour 6, I'd watched the sun set through those massive airport windows. The terminal had emptied out considerably. The coffee shop was closing, chairs stacked on tables. Even the janitor who'd shown me kindness earlier had finished his shift and gone home to whatever family was waiting for him. I sat there in that increasingly quiet space, my phone battery at 15%, and I made one last call. It rang once, twice, then that familiar click. "You've reached David. Leave a message." But this time, instead of my usual worried mother voice, something else came out. Something I barely recognized as myself. "David, it's your mother. I've been sitting at this airport for 6 hours. 6 hours. I know you're not sick. I know you went away for the weekend while I waited here like a fool." My voice was steady now, calm in a way that scared me. "I raised you better than this. I taught you what it means to show up for people who love you. But apparently, those lessons didn't stick." A security guard walked by and glanced at me with concern. I probably looked like exactly what I was, a woman at the end of her rope. "I'm taking a taxi home now." "And David, this changes everything between us. Everything. You need to understand that when you abandon someone who loves you, there are consequences. Real ones." I hung up and immediately called a cab company. While I waited for the driver, I sat there thinking about all the times I'd made excuses for him. When he forgot my birthday 2 years ago, he's just busy with work. When he missed Christmas dinner last year, he's stressed about his relationship. When he stopped calling me back regularly, he's becoming independent. But this wasn't independence. This was cruelty. When the taxi pulled up and the driver helped me with my suitcase, I gave him my address and settled into the back seat. As we pulled away from the airport, I watched it disappear in the side mirror. I had no idea that this $45 taxi ride was about to become the most expensive trip my son had ever cost me. The taxi driver was a soft-spoken man named Hassan, probably in his 60s, with kind eyes that kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror. "Long flight?" he asked gently as we merged onto the highway. "Long day," I replied. And then something about his genuine concern just broke me open. Maybe it was because he was a complete stranger. Or maybe it was because I'd been holding everything together for so many hours. But I found myself telling him everything. About the wait, about the unanswered calls, about my son going away for the weekend while knowing I'd be stranded. Hassan listened without judgment, occasionally making small sounds of sympathy. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "I have 3 children," he said finally, "all grown now. And you know what I told them when they became adults? I said. "I will always love you, but I will never let you disrespect me." Love without respect is not really love at all. His words hit me like a revelation. For too many years, I think I confused enabling with loving, I heard myself say. I made it so easy for him to take me for granted that's exactly what he did. As we drove through familiar neighborhoods, I started connecting dots I'd been too afraid to connect before. Last month, when I'd lent him money for his rent, he'd never paid me back, and when I gently asked about it, he'd gotten irritated with me, like I was the problem. The time before that, when I'd driven 2 hours to help him move apartments, and he'd barely thanked me, just expected it, like I was some kind of service he could call when convenient. And all those family gatherings where he'd show up late, leave early, spend more time on his phone than talking to anyone. I'd made excuses then too. "He's just tired," I'd tell relatives. "Work has been stressful." "You know what the hardest part is?" I said to Hassan as we pulled into my driveway. "I don't think this was about forgetting or being busy. I think he just doesn't care. Not really." Hassan turned around to look at me directly. "Ma'am, sometimes the people who love us the most teach us how to treat them. Maybe it's time to teach him something different." I paid him the fare plus a generous tip, and as I watched his taillights disappear down my street, I realized something had fundamentally shifted inside me. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was done. Walking into my empty house that night felt different somehow, like I was seeing it through new eyes. I dropped my suitcase by the door and went straight to my laptop. I don't know what compelled me to do it. Maybe I needed to confirm what I already knew in my heart, but I opened up Facebook and searched for my son's profile. There it was, posted just 4 hours ago, while I was still sitting in that airport chair. A photo of him and some girl I'd never seen before, both of them grinning at what looked like a lake house or cabin somewhere. The caption read, "Weekend getaway with my favorite person. Unplugged, life-perfect weather." Perfect weather, while his mother sat abandoned in a fluorescent-lit terminal. I scrolled through the comments, friends saying things like, "You two are so cute," and "Have fun, lovebirds." His girlfriend, because clearly that's who she was, had commented with heart emojis and "already having the best time with you." The timestamp on the post was 2:47 p.m. I'd still been calling him then, leaving voicemails that got more desperate by the hour. But what really broke something inside me was scrolling further down his timeline. Pictures from last weekend, the weekend before that, concert photos, restaurant meals, hiking trips, a whole life I knew nothing about, friends I'd never heard of, places he'd never mentioned. When had I become such a stranger to my own son's life? I kept scrolling, looking for any mention of me, any photo of us together, any acknowledgement that he even had a mother. Nothing. It was like I didn't exist in his world unless he needed something from me. I closed the laptop and sat in my dark living room, really thinking about our relationship for the first time in years. When was the last time he'd called me just to see how I was doing? When was the last time he'd asked about my life, my health, my feelings about anything? I couldn't remember. But I could remember every time he'd called needing money, every time he'd asked me to help him move, or pick up his mail when he was out of town, or watch his apartment while he traveled. The truth was devastating and crystal clear. I wasn't his mother in his mind. I was his convenience. I didn't sleep that night, not even a little. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, a notepad, and a growing sense of purpose that surprised me. I started researching things I'd never thought I'd need to know. Elder law, emotional abuse, financial exploitation, parent-adult-child relationships, and legal responsibilities. What I found was eye-opening. Over the past 3 years, I'd lent David nearly $8,000. I had records of every bank transfer, every check I'd written. Just until I get back on my feet, Mom. Just to cover rent this month. Just for the security deposit. Just. And never paid back. Not a single dollar. I'd also been paying his car insurance because he'd asked me to keep him on my family plan temporarily 2 years ago. His phone bill, too. Even his gym membership, because he'd said he was between jobs and needed to stay healthy to interview well. Between jobs. I pulled up his social media again and looked at all those restaurant photos, those weekend trips, those expensive-looking concerts. He didn't look like someone struggling financially. But that wasn't even the part that made me angriest. I found articles about something called elder abandonment, about adult children who use their aging parents as emotional and financial resources while offering nothing in return, about the psychological impact of being consistently devalued by someone you love unconditionally. One article hit me especially hard. It talked about how some adult children develop a pattern of treating their parents as service providers rather than human beings deserving of basic respect and consideration. That was exactly what had happened to us. I started making lists. Every birthday he'd forgotten, every holiday he'd skipped, every time he'd borrowed money, every promise he'd broken, every time I'd felt like I was bothering him by simply existing. By 3 a.m, I had 15 pages of notes and a phone number for a family law attorney who specialized in, among other things, recovering loans between family members. I stared at that phone number until the sun came up. My son had taught me that my love, my time, and my money meant nothing to him. Maybe it was time I taught him what nothing actually looked like. Monday morning at 9 a.m. sharp, I was sitting in the law office of Margaret Chen, no relation to my neighbor, but she had the same kind eyes and direct manner that made me feel heard. "Tell me what happened," she said, and I did. All of it. The airport, the weekend trip, the years of financial support with no reciprocation, the pattern of disrespect that had finally crystallized into abandonment. Margaret listened without interrupting, taking notes in a neat, precise handwriting that reminded me of my own mother's. "Mrs. Johnson," she said when I finished, "what you're describing isn't just about money. It's about a systematic pattern of exploitation. Your son has been treating you like a bank that never expects repayment and a service that never closes." She pulled out a legal pad and started explaining my options. "We can file for recovery of the loans. You have excellent documentation. We can also explore emotional distress damages, though that's harder to prove. But there's something else that might be more powerful." "What's that?" "A restraining order, based on financial abuse and abandonment. It would legally require him to stay away from you unless he's prepared to address his debts and his behavior. Sometimes, the shock of legal action opens people's eyes in ways that years of enabling never could." The thought of taking out a restraining order against my own son should have horrified me. A week ago, it would have. But sitting in that office, remembering those 6 hours at the airport, remembering that smug social media post, "How long does something like this take?" I asked. "We can file the paperwork this afternoon. He'll be served within 48 hours. I thought about him getting those papers at his apartment, or maybe at work. I thought about him realizing that his mother, the woman he'd taken for granted for years, had finally stopped accepting unacceptable behavior. "There's one more thing," Margaret said gently. "Once we do this, your relationship with your son will never be the same, even if he comes around. Even if he pays you back and apologizes, this will always be between you. Are you prepared for that?" I looked out her office window at the busy street below. People heading to jobs, meeting friends for lunch, living their lives with dignity and mutual respect. "Miss Chen," I said, "my relationship with my son ended 6 hours into waiting for him at that airport. This is just making it official. An hour later, I walked out of that office with filed legal papers and the strangest feeling of peace I'd experienced in years. I was making dinner, just for myself, something I was getting used to again, when my phone rang. David's name on the caller ID made my stomach clench, but not the way it used to. This time, I was ready. "Mom, what the hell is this?" His voice was sharp, angry, nothing like the son who used to tell me about his day after school. I just got served with legal papers. At work, in front of my boss and my colleagues. "Hello, David," I said calmly, turning off the stove. "How was your weekend trip?" The silence on the other end was deafening. "Are you serious right now? You're suing me because I missed picking you up from the airport. That's insane, Mom. You're being completely ridiculous. I'm suing you because you owe me $8,000 and have spent years treating me like I'm nothing more than an ATM with legs," I said, my voice steady. "The airport was just the final straw." $8,000, that's not accurate. And besides, that was family money. You can't sue family for helping them out. "Watch me." Another silence. Then, "Mom, come on. This is crazy. I was going through a rough patch. You know that. I was planning to pay you back." "When?" "You've been planning to pay me back for 3 years, David. Meanwhile, you've been on vacation trips, eating at expensive restaurants, and apparently serious enough with some girlfriend to go on romantic weekend getaways, a girlfriend you've never even mentioned to me. How do you know about—" He stopped himself. "How do I know about your social media posts while I was sitting abandoned at the airport? Because I finally stopped making excuses for you and started paying attention to who you actually are instead of who I wished you were." I could hear him breathing heavily, maybe pacing. When he spoke again, his voice was different, smaller. "Mom, I'm sorry about the airport. I really am. Something came up last minute and I panicked and I handled it wrong." "Something came up?" "David, I saw the photos. You left town for a planned weekend trip while knowing I'd be stranded there." "Okay, yes, but—" "There is no but. There's no excuse that makes abandoning your mother at an airport acceptable. And there's definitely no excuse for 3 years of treating me like I exist solely for your convenience." The line went quiet, except for his breathing. "So what do you want from me?" he finally asked, and the resentment in his voice told me everything I needed to know about where we really stood. "I want my $8,000 back. I want you off my insurance policies. I want you to understand that love without respect isn't love at all. It's just exploitation. And David—" "What?" "I want you to stay away from me until you're ready to treat me like a human being who deserves basic courtesy." I hung up before he could respond. 6 months later, I received a cashier's check for $8,000 with a note that simply said, "As requested." No apology, no explanation, just payment, like I was a creditor he'd finally gotten around to settling with. Margaret called me that afternoon. "The restraining order can be lifted now that he's fulfilled the financial obligations," she said. "Do you want to proceed with that?" I thought about it for a long time. "Yes," I said finally. "But I want him to know that just because the legal case is closed doesn't mean our relationship goes back to the way it was." The truth is, I'd changed during those 6 months in ways I never expected. Without David's constant financial drain and emotional chaos, I'd started living again. I'd joined a book club. I'd taken a pottery class. I'd even started dating a kind widower I'd met at the library. For the first time in years, I felt like a whole person instead of just someone's mother. David did reach out eventually, a careful, formal text message asking if we could meet for coffee. I agreed, but I met him at a public place, and I kept the conversation short. He looked older somehow, more tired. "I've been thinking about what you said," he told me, "about respect. And I think I forgot you were a person. Not just my mom, but a person with feelings and needs, and I'm sorry, really sorry. It was something. Not everything I'd hoped for, but something." "David," I said, "I will always love you. You're my son. But I will never again let you treat me like I don't matter. Those days are over." He nodded, and I could see tears in his eyes. "Can we try again, slowly?" "We can try," I said. "But this time, it has to be a relationship between two adults who respect each other. Not a parent-child dynamic where one person gives everything and the other takes it for granted." It's been a year since then. We have coffee once a month. He calls me on my birthday and major holidays. He asks about my life, my pottery class, my book club. It's not the close relationship I once thought I wanted, but it's honest. And sometimes, late at night when I'm reading in my quiet house, I think about that woman sitting in the airport chair, making excuses for someone who'd abandoned her. I'm proud of her for finally standing up. I'm proud that she learned the difference between loving someone and enabling them. Most of all, I'm proud that she discovered something I wish every parent could understand. Demanding respect from your children isn't selfish, it's necessary.